Welcome back to the PI Files, where we dig into real cases, real people, and the role of private investigators in uncovering the truth. I'm your host, Eric Peterson. I'm a licensed private investigator here in California. Today, my guest on the PI Files is Efren Delgado. He is a former FBI agent, a security professional, and the author of the book, The Opposite is True. Thank you very much, Efren.
Absolutely. Good to be here.
So can you tell the audience just about who you are, what you do, what made you get into the FBI aside from, the movie Point Break? What inspired you to go into this field?
I do like surfing and I do like catching bad guys, but I was never really the Johnny Utah in real life. But I think just like any of us, my motivation was to help people not be victims or to help witnesses not be oppressed by criminals, and then to help catch the bad guys in whatever institution that could do that the best. In my mind, it was the FBI as being the premier law enforcement agency, but I've learned since then that there's a lot of great departments that do that good work. My background is spent the first half of my time in the FBI in the National Security Division. So that's chasing around spies, terrorists, counter espionage, that sort of thing. So that clandestine world was kind of a unique vantage point. And then I entered the more traditional criminal division, which is, the due process, legal stuff that even police, but under federal statutes. I was assigned specifically to the Civil Rights Unit in Los Angeles. And so that's color of law, which are quote unquote bad cops. But it could be anybody with authority abusing that authority, human trafficking, and hate crimes. So not a lot of people realize that all of those still occur, especially hate crimes, but they do. But I think they become politicized. So filtering through all those political, disingenuous angles and motives was a big part of the job. And frankly, like with the color of law aspect, I exonerated probably 98% of the false accusations against righteous police. But I looked for systemic criminal patterns of behavior from the bad cops to help corroborate who was actually guilty and who wasn't, not for mistakes and that sort of thing.
What assignment did you like best?
Any assignment that I could be productive in helping people. I didn't care what the violation was. So I even, collaterally helped other groups with like arresting gang members or arresting pedophiles and that sort of thing. So as long as we're doing good, pushing the ball forward and helping people, that was kind of my main focus. Yeah, and it was enjoyable.
Now, with respect to the police and investigating, how did you end up doing that? How were you received? Was it a lot of behind the scenes?
Yeah, interesting enough, the good cops were sources. So they would come forward because they were being oppressed just like the citizens were. They weren't being beaten like some of the victims were, but they were still oppressed within their own departments. And for example, I had a case where the guys would tune up people they were quote unquote interrogating. They would turn off the cameras, they would beat and injure the people, and they would have a guard posted at the door, one of their own select groups. And so good cops were like, well, hey, what's going on over there? And why can't I go there? And a lot of intimidation. So it's hurting the entire department. Filtering through all of that was an issue.
Were they bigger cities or smaller cities that you worked?
The problem was often in smaller departments. You've probably seen that correlation. The same is true. I didn't work public corruption, but I assisted public corruption agents. And I saw that trend too. So it's not just corruption in our big federal government. There's a lot of corruption in city councils. And in my book, I have a whole chapter on power being a natural corrupter, but I have parentheses there saying, unless you insert humility. So it's kind of the only antidote, in my view, to not be corrupted by any form of power, whether it's good looks, money, a gun, elected HOA president, whatever it is. Unless you're humbled, you will be corrupted by that power. And that was definitely exemplified in my time in the Bureau. But it's been about 10 years since I left the Bureau.
But what would be the motive? What would be the incentive for some of these cities? Money in their pockets, certain favors, or what when you would be taking a look at?
For like abusive police or corruption?
Abusive police and then the corruption within the cities. When you say like city council and things like that, what would be the reason they would abuse that power, or how would
That's a good question. I think the best way I could answer that honestly is just more broadly the motivation for any criminal any abusive person, even just kind of like a bully, is ironically weakness. So their own insecurities, weaknesses, vulnerabilities scare them. This is my view in general on criminality, and you could probably empathize from your experience. But I think they thicken their turtle shells because they don't want people to see how weak they are, how scared they are. So they're like chihuahuas barking at the doorbell. The chihuahua doesn't want whatever's on the other side to know how weak they are, so they bark louder. So I think all of criminality and people just being mean to other people, it boils down to them just not wanting to be vulnerable. So it's weakness, not strength. So when city council members are corrupt or cops have rusty badges, whatever the abuse of authority is, or whatever the abuse of any kind of other person is, it's to hide their own weaknesses. Think of like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. Used loud, projecting loudness and strength with all the special effects and the bold, bolstering voice. And then Toto pulled the curtain back and you see this withery old man.
Yeah.
All bad people are chihuahuas or withery old, weak people. So that should encourage your audience that they're stronger than the bad guys by the mere fact that they aren't the bad guys.
I think you've got that, but then also, there's opportunity for contracts, real estate plays, because, sometimes you wonder why somebody would get into city council and then you find out, now they're involved in these business dealings or,
I see it as just shell building. So the more power a bad person has, the more they can insulate themselves. So the more money you get, the more connections you have, the more they conspire together, the safer they feel because their turtle shell gets thicker. But ironically, they lose practice from what really would help them with those insecurities and weaknesses, which is self-reflection, fulfillment, serving other people, meaning. So another analogy I'll use a lot is, if you're human, you're mortal. If you're mortal, you're flawed. We all have weaknesses, except what we do with our free will. The bad guys go one way, selfishly, and they thicken their turtle shells. And the good guys go the other way, selflessly, and they're self-reflecting through humility. They're wanting to improve. They're wanting to defend other people against what's happened to them. So the bad guys are putting little Band-Aids over their wounds and not really solving the problem. They're just getting little dopamine hits from their little mini successes or winning battles. The good guys are fulfilling themselves, selflessly, and they're mending those wounds and getting stronger. So as the bad guys have these mini successes, they're atrophying from what it takes to really get better, which is the self-reflection and meaning and fulfillment and serving others. It's counterintuitive. That's why I named it The Opposite is True. But that ironically hurts them more. Their quote-unquote successes of more power and corruption hurts them because they get weaker. They're out of shape for what really will give them fulfillment. That was kind of deep, but long.
No, I like it. Is there any case that stands out with the FBI that that you can talk about, that you're able to discuss for you?
Not a lot of them, but the ones that were publicized, I guess, in the media are pretty safe, and I put some of those in the book. Yeah, and I guess one interesting one in the National Security Division, there was a big espionage case on Robert Hansen. We had a mole that was spying for the Russians for about 20 years. We thought it was one guy, but it turned out to be Bob Hansen. And as we built that case, it was all in the shadows, cloak and dagger kind of stuff. And that's kind of, it's interesting because, first of all, espionage is a rare kind of violation that people get exposed to. So I feel privileged, honored to be able to have countered some of that. But then you learn about the world where everything's about secrets and who has information about other people. So you kind of look at it like a big metaphor for like how life works, how wars work and how people interact. If you learn about a used car that's been damaged, but it wasn't reported, but you have a source that told you about it, you can negotiate better. You still want the car, but you could get a better deal. Mm-hmm. So that's intelligence. But when people are trying to steal your intelligence, they're trying to gain that power. So the FBI was like, the defense, protecting our goal, and the CIA or the other intelligence agencies throughout the world are trying to get information from other organizations. So Bob Hansen was a traitor, so he was giving up or essentially letting people score on our goal until we caught him. And so the big takeaway is criminals, tyrants, untrustworthy people are always in one form or another in the shadow. They're never overt, and sometimes it could be a mere mask. And so you, your audience, everybody right now is thinking about people who are disingenuous, and those are the masks that are covering their real intention, their ulterior motives. So that's how you could kind of gauge who the bad guys are.
Yeah.
Trust your instincts.
So do you have an opinion on what would be something that maybe the public gets wrong about the FBI?
Yeah, I think one of the best tools of the FBI, the CIA, or any big bureaucracy is smoke and mirrors. And so I think the public thinks the FBI is kind of invincible, but it's just a bunch of people with jobs. And a big part of them are motivated to help others. But there's many people in the FBI and many organizations that probably have ulterior motives, shining their badge, looking great, feeling good about themselves, resolving their daddy issues, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But my favorite human trait in anybody is authenticity. And I've noticed that the most capable people, the strongest people, are also the kindest. They're not barking at the doorbell. They're not showing off, and they do close their mouths sometimes. They're not constantly talking. So authenticity is really revealed in people's competence, kindness. It's counterintuitive because you'd think the loudest people would be the most confident, but it's the opposite.
Now, when you transitioned from the FBI to private sector, was there any challenging parts in that, or was it hard to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think the human default is comfort. So you want to stick to what you know. So anytime there's any kind of change in life, even if it's a positive change, a new baby, marriage, a new career, the change itself is difficult. So I think I was surprised a little bit because I was naive. I was in the government my whole career. And then I learned in the private sector that you sink or swim. So you learn that too. So if you don't do what you need to do, you'll sink. So you just have to put in the work, get creative, meet the right people, treat people right, just to keep working. Ironically, people in the federal government have a lot of, job security. So that steady paycheck almost like creates a complacency to some degree, unless they're intrinsically motivated. So yeah, I think it was humbling joining the private sector, but I appreciate it. I feel like I've grown a lot.
What do you specialize in the private sector?
So my focus is still in the security realm. I mostly work to protect private clients with what they call executive protection, a fancy word for bodyguard, and threat assessments. So I'll do some consulting in helping them assess different threats from either active pursuers, stalkers, or different entities like corporations. So most of my clients are private clients, but some of them are corporations and work a little bit undercover within their businesses just to make sure they're safe. And then also private events like media interviews or award ceremonies, that sort of thing. Yeah. Weddings.
Are there any skills or methods from the FBI that you apply to your current jobs and some of those assignments?
Yeah, absolutely. I learned a lot being in the FBI, not only from the FBI, but just from my experiences in the FBI. And one kind of counterintuitive takeaway is sometimes the bad guys are within your own home, within your own offices. So people are people is the big takeaway. Human beings are all flawed. They all have different motives. And when somebody's motivated correctly, it's usually correlates with selflessness. And when people are motivated incorrectly, it's selfish, self-preservation kind of ulterior motives. So I found that in the FBI and in the private sector, even somebody at Thanksgiving criticizing the dry turkey, they probably don't worry about the turkey. They have another issue. So, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Now, what inspired you to write The Opposite is True?
I think I've always had kind of a clear understanding of human behavior, but I couldn't articulate it so that everybody could understand it. So like past psychology people like Sigmund Freud focused on the unconscious as a psychoanalyst, or behavioral psychologists, or different forms of theories in psychology. I wanted to scrape off all that psychobabble and just pull the curtain back and tell the reader, who I presume is the good guy, that they're stronger than the bad guys for the mere fact that they aren't bad guys. So in the book, I give different principles that they could kind of rely on and be encouraged by to, number one, understand what people's motives are, good or bad, and to have confidence that they should pursue their own calling, and they're stronger than the criminals. And some that just come to mind, emotion and logic are like oil and water. They never mix. People mix them up all the time and creates conflict in business and personal lives, between nations. So simply being aware that part of humanity is our emotional side. That's kind of our passions, the fuel of human behavior. And the logical side is breaking down different realities that may be technical or difficult to face, but it's both elements. So when one person's emoting and the other person's being reasonable, they're not going to communicate well. Both have to be in the logic side. If they're both emoting, you might as well that's why people say take a break. Hey, let's take a step back so you could actually make some progress. So that fact alone is one of the principles in here that I think just fuels a lot of difficulties. And it could help when we kind of learn to empathize better. Another one I mentioned too is power is a natural corrupter unless you insert humility. That's a concept that could help you so much when you're self-aware of your own power or other people, where they could be coming from. Another one that I'll encourage the reader is we fear only one thing, and it's not snakes or sharks or terrorists, it's the unknown. So if you think about it, like who's least afraid of sharks? It's like surfers, marine biologists, and yet they're in more danger because they're around sharks. Who's least afraid of public speaking? People who public speak. So they're doing it. They're more exposed to humiliation or making a mistake, but they're used to it. So, and you could go on and on. So the takeaway is learn about what you fear, practice it, experience it, and you could overcome that fear. It'll still be a fear, but you will be able to overcome it. And you'll sense it's there, but you'll be able to manage it.
Do you think the majority of your education on this topic came from, I saw that, you have degrees in this, but did it come from your experience over the degrees, or a combination of both?
It's probably a combination, but I've always thought that some people intuitively have a better understanding than others with human behavior. Like I'll never be able to play basketball very well, and I can't sing, but I understand human behavior. But I think my education in forensic psychology and that sort of thing complemented my natural ability to understand people and be able to articulate it. There were a lot of people in my graduate school classes studying psychology who should have been in therapy, frankly. So it's kind of interesting and fun. But yeah, you'll find those different correlations in whatever industry, certain patterns.
Yeah. Now, is the book more focused on storytelling, tactics, or life lessons, or just a combination of all of them?
So when I wrote it, I had a little sticky on my iPad that I wrote most of the book on, and I put number 1, it can't be boring, and number 2, it's reader first. Actually, I had those backwards. Reader first, and number 2 is not boring. The way I articulated not boring is it has to entertain or educate. And I think the best way to educate is through entertainment. So every point that I made, like you only fear the unknown, emotion, logic are like oil and water, whatever the principle is, I backed it up with my own experiences or experiences of people, their own biographies throughout history. to show that human behavior has been the same from the beginning of time to very recent history, and it will always be the same. So I filled it with stories to entertain and illustrate my points. So I didn't want the book to be boring, so that's kind of my format.
Got it. Is there a standout story or insight from the book that listeners would appreciate?
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
I'm sure. Yeah.
It's about 550 pages of content and 30 pages of citing my sources. So all my sources are cited. Standout story. Wow. I guess my opening one is kind of a personal one. What motivated me to take this trajectory to begin with? I started school 1 year younger than everybody else. So when I entered second grade, I was the age of a first grader. So at that age, that's a significant difference physically, mentally, psychologically. So I was kind of childish and innocent in second grade compared to the bigger second graders that are a year older than me. So I experienced a little bit of bullying from two big kids. And I remember asking myself, I start out the book this way, why would somebody be mean when they could simply be nice? That child's question is the essence of psychology. Why do people do what they do? But taking it a step further, why do bad people do what they do? So at the time, I had no idea, zero idea. I just knew I didn't want to be like that. And I had enough positive experiences with the kind kids that, even though I was intimidated and hurt and all that stuff and beat up a little bit, it was nothing compared to what a lot of other people have gone through. But I learned a lot. And so I kind of made a vow. I got held back a year. So I was the same age as most of the other kids in second grade the second time. And I was entering that school. I switched schools also. And I was entering that second school thinking everything's going to be the same. But in reality, it helped a lot to switch. And I got along with everybody. I had a sense of humor. So I got a little bit popular, and I made a vow to use that power to help other people. But that interest in human behavior stayed. So I don't know if it's chicken or the egg or whatever, but I remained interested in what motivated human people. It wasn't until like sixth grade that I learned psychology was an actual form of study. But I pursued that, and that brought me to pursuing protecting people in an official occupation through the FBI and in the private sector. And I think writing is my trifecta in a different form of protecting people through education, by exposing the bad guys for the weaklings that they are and encouraging the good guys for the unknown strength that I know they have that they may not realize that they have. Because ironically, humility is a power, and it signifies strength. But a lot of humble people by nature think they're not that strong because they're humble. So the Bible says in Matthew 10:16, be innocent as doves, but wise as serpents. So it's easier to fight fire with fire, but then you become the bad guy. You become the villain. So you don't want that. But if you're too innocent as a dove, then you'll be taken advantage of. So keeping that healthy balance is the challenge, but it's our human obligation, I think.
So your target audience is pretty much everybody, but is there a particular group or somebody getting into a career that you would recommend your book to?
Yeah, a couple different industries. Anybody interested in psychology would appreciate the book, but particularly people who feel oppressed, I think it'll be really encouraging to them. And people get oppressed in all kinds of contexts. In their careers, it could be an intimidating coworker or a supervisor who doesn't want the best for them. I talk about negative Nancy's in chapter 13, and those are the people who pretend to be your ally, but you notice them looking at you too long and paying too much attention to what you're doing instead of doing their own thing. So those are red flags. I tell you how to spot those red flags. So any career person who's worried about oppression, that sort of thing. And the other career that I think stands out is the writing world. If you understand your protagonist and your antagonist and what character arcs, are like in real life, then you could write better characters and you could write more for the reader as opposed to just writing a story. It's emotion and character arc that really helps you relate with your reader.
Yeah. Where can people purchase The Opposite Is True?
So it's on Amazon or any other order format, Barnes & Noble.
Yeah.
But you could order anywhere online,
Now, getting back to the security industry, what do you think, maybe if you could give me 3 essential skills that every person in the security industry, should develop?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the most important thing is assess your norm. So if your context is, let me think, you're at a Taylor Swift concert, and there's some guy in camouflage wearing a black backpack, that's a clue, right? So I've talked about this before, but it's the game of whack-a-mole. So as soon as you see an outlier or something that stands out, it doesn't mean they're guilty, but you should focus your attention on that. And then the next step after that is assessing that standout. So that's number 1. Number 2, be aware that people within your own organization or team could be one of the bad guys. It may be a rare issue, but it's an issue. We had Bob Hansen, biggest spy in history, and that's espionage is in essence betrayal. So there's betrayals in families, there's betrayals in bakeries, whatever the work environment is or the family is. You could have the negative Nancy within your own nest. So that would be the other counterintuitive takeaway there. Let's see, a third one is really appreciate the humble people around you because they're probably the most competent.
Got it. Now, switching back to some of the law enforcement stuff, we touched on this, but what are your thoughts on, corruption within police departments, city governments? There's been a lot of stuff. We've got a new FBI director, Kash Patel. There's a lot of buzz about the Epstein list and all this. Is it so compartmentalized? We'll take the FBI to where, things are just kind of being, we'll investigate this. We won't investigate this. We'll stop this here. Maybe some thoughts on those things.
Yeah, that's tricky. I've been out of the Bureau for 10 years. I still have some friends in there. But personally, I'm a fan of Kash Patel, but I'm out of the loop. So I think I'm right about him. Like I said, my favorite trait in people is authenticity. Even if it's not always stuff you like, but if people are authentic, he gives off a lot of green flags for authenticity. But I don't have the ins and outs because I'm not in it. I'm very curious myself about the Epstein list, but I don't know much about it. I do believe there's a deep state, and I believe there's a lot of corruption. And frankly, I think there's a lot of influence in realms we don't really, deal with every day, supernaturally. I believe in God, and I believe in evil. I know there's evil. So I think there's a lot at play where people assume they're the puppet master, but they're the ones who are being puppeted. They're the marionettes. But because emotion and logic don't mix, people emotionally get addicted to different forms of power, recognition, love, friendship, belonging, all those things that the enemy will use to distract or compromise people. So I don't know if I could say ass, but do you really want a bad guy's hand up your ass? Using you like a puppet, or do you want to live authentically, which I think provides more fulfillment? It requires more work, but yeah, that's my take on that. So I don't have a lot of specific information, but I believe we're seeing a lot, and if people are willing to look, get out of their comfort zone and see a lot of truths, they'll understand things a lot better than they might superficially.
Do you think there should be more of like a business approach to law enforcement? We talked about this earlier where you were saying that, you're guaranteed a paycheck.
Yeah.
And I know some people in different agencies, and one guy told me, he said, yeah, they're asking us what we're doing and what cases we're handling. I think we're at a political stage right now where people are being put to task and certain government entities have been eliminated and money has been saved. When you look at the public sector, now that you've been in the private sector, do you think it should be more run like a business? I know there's different, entities and influences and programs, but obviously at the end of the day, work needs to get done.
Yeah. I think it should. How you do it is difficult. You're always going to have politics, and politics by its very nature compromises the mission. So in the private sector, the mission could be making a profit. So if you don't make a profit, you have to cut staff and then rework your system. In the public sector, with law enforcement, the mission should be protecting people, protecting witnesses, and preventing crime. It's more reactionary, as you know. But prevention can't be articulated as well in a political bureaucracy. I proposed a couple proactive ideas that got quickly shut down when I was in the FBI because they were controversial. I was working human trafficking. I mentioned this in the book. And I proposed some proactive undercover operations to infiltrate these sketchy industries and the black market and all that sort of thing. But because it left a bad taste in the supervisor's mouth, which I understand, it could look bad. We weren't probably able to save some people or to find them and save them. So it's difficult. It's a paradox. I can say that the start of our country, our nation, were people volunteering to run our country, to be politicians, but not be paid for it. They were volunteer positions. They were farmers, writers, doctors. They had their own trades. So it was a sacrifice to volunteer and help develop our nation. As soon as it became a career where you're earning money, there's an ulterior motive, and power is a natural corrupter unless you insert humility. But it's hard to be humble when you're getting drunk on power, and then you're getting extra drunk on power with prestige, extra money, investment advice, whatever that may be, So by its very nature, I think making it more of a service job and not as profitable is a start, because then you'll get more genuine people volunteering to work. I think they should be paid, of course, but making it, I guess, more accountability would be significant.
Just some real quick questions. Favorite piece of gear or tech tool you used during your FBI career?
I'm old-fashioned, where I always kept a shotgun with me. I think it's the most reliable weapon. You only have 5 rounds, but and during those North Hollywood, bank robberies, it would have been really effective to have some slugs with you. Mm-hmm. But yeah, shotgun was probably my favorite, and pistol. I'm not even a big gun guy, but my pistol and my shotgun were the most reliable. A good fountain pen when your phone dies. And a good tool I used in the FBI, and I still use to this day, is just being authentic with people, genuine. You get more from people when you're just honest and you have their best interests. Yeah.
What's the most realistic movie or TV show about law enforcement, in your opinion?
Well, definitely Point Break. No, just kidding. That's good. Yeah. Well, I'll have to think about that one.
Okay. We can go back to it.
Yeah.
The worst professional advice you've ever received?
The worst professional advice I ever received. Wow, that's another good one. God, these are catching me off guard.
We can go back to this one as well. I got another one for you. What is the one thing every PI, victim, citizen, anybody should understand about federal investigations?
Federal investigations criminally rely and should rely on their local law enforcement partners. because the police are the bread and butter of understanding the streets, the sources, the context. So a lot of people misconstrue because of movies, of course, that FBI is here, stand aside. And it's not like that at all. If you're not nice to the cops, they won't be nice to you and you won't get anything done. So that's my biggest correction on that one. FBI agents know that. So the good ones know that. And then there's always just one or two that'll ruin relationships. But for the most part, cops are aware of that and they're very forgiving. So we appreciate that.
How many pairs of those tan tactical pants did you have to buy? Because it seems like that's all everybody's wearing when they're wearing their windbreakers. Yeah.
And I don't want to like throw the brand under the bus, but I hated those.
Yeah.
But Costco has great versions.
Oh yeah.
That I do wear.
Yeah.
But yeah, the brand for some reason that maybe they have some kind of deal with the federal government. I'm not a big fan of their gear. It's uncomfortable and very geeky.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, back to the movie or TV show about law enforcement. It could be FBI or whatever you've observed.
You know, I worked a lot of undercover in the National Security Division, but it wasn't deep cover. So I have a unique respect and appreciation for deep cover agents or officers. I started pursuing that route to work undercover. Our phase 1, I passed. The tests, the psychological evaluations, that sort of thing. Phase 2, I had a very interesting takeaway that I learned about myself. And the undercover agents who were talking to me told me just, look, you passed phase 1, no problem, but you look like a good guy. And that honesty, they have to live in the real world.
Yeah.
So even if it would have offended me or but I passed the test, I just want the real world as well. So I took that and I'm like, look, it's not for me. At the end of the day, keeping your eye on that North Star of helping people and stopping bad guys, in whatever way I meant to do it was good for me. But that was humbling in a good way.
Yeah.
I'm not meant to do, deep UC work. But because of that, the real life stories, I've met some great undercover agents who have big careers. I never met Joe Pistone, but that would probably be one of my favorites. Donnie Brasco is the Joe Pistone story, where he portrayed Donnie Brasco and took down a couple families, one for sure. Did a lot of damage for the Italian mafia in New York on the East Coast. But yeah, I think I'd say Donnie Brasco.
So Bosch for me, that's pretty accurate, especially with LAPD.
Oh, really? Yeah. And it's specific to LA culture.
Yeah. And they get it. They do very well.
It's Connolly, right? The author?
Yeah, Michael Connolly. Yeah.
Michael Connolly, yeah. And Michael Connolly, I talk about him in my book for the beginning of a chapter, just real quick, but he did research with the LAPD and he sat with them.
Yeah.
And I love that when people are really invested in their research, just again, for that authenticity, that's what resonates with readers and that's what resonates with your audience. Obviously, you guys are truth seekers, so this is a good podcast to get the truth. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at those scenes where they're in the stations and the casting that they do for the detectives is pretty spot on. Just the persona, all of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
He, in one of his books, I mentioned it in mine, he was sitting at one of the LAPD desks across from another officer where the desks were put together. Mm-hmm. And the desk he was using during his research or whatever had this glass cover with a bunch of photos underneath it. And I don't remember if this was a real officer or detective or if it was a character in one of his books, so forgive me. But the story was he had you would think he'd have a bunch of pictures of his family, his dog, and that sort of thing. But he had a bunch of photos of victims who the bad guys weren't caught. So on the surface, it sounds, he's morbid, he's got a screw loose. But he used that negative thing, flipped it, and turned it into a positive.
Yeah.
An emotional motivation, which is the value of emotion.
Yeah.
When you're pumped up and you remember what's motivating you, that'll keep you focused on your North Star. So Michael Connolly used it. And I suggest people use emotion, in that same way. Remember what your North Star is.
Yeah, I believe they put that in Bosch at his desk as well.
Okay.
And that's pretty. I remember working detectives, and it was one giant room, and desks were all next to each other. We had to share computers.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun. Everybody was on top of each other.
Yeah. But you get closer that way too.
Yeah, yeah. And then the movies that stand out for me is so End of Watch really captures patrol and the inside of the car.
I love that movie.
Accurately.
I could see that.
Yeah, really good.
Really sad though.
Yeah.
I mean, the ending.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was crazy.
But worth the watch for sure.
But they captured they're very accurate.
And Jake Gyllenhaal's fantastic and everything.
It was good. Part of your, I believe this is in the book, but definitely on your website, adversity is a catalyst for purpose.
Yeah.
I really like that. And that, I'm sure, everybody's had adversity in their lives. And it's so true. What a great quote you have on that website.
Thanks. It's actually not in the book.
Okay.
I thought of that quote after publishing the book, and I was, I really wish that was in the book. But the whole quote I have is adversity is the catalyst of purpose, action, and success.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of my goals of this nonfiction book, The Opposite is True, is to flip everybody's difficulties, their traumas, their weaknesses, their insecurities, and turn it into a positive. And if you think about, even your audience right now, think about all the bad things you've gone through, and it's actually what's helped you find, whether you know it or not, your purpose.
Yeah.
And if you keep getting motivated that way, that will be your strength. And God kind of conveys this sort of thing by showing us in nature. When you're working out, you're literally tearing muscle before you could get stronger. Failures are the prerequisite to success. It's all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, adversity is the catalyst for purpose it's a great takeaway.
Now, where can people follow your work or connect with you? Your website?
Yeah.
Social media?
I think best, probably the website, efrendelgado.com, and that's EFREN Delgado.com. I have a few projects coming up in the near future, probably in the fall, that I'm pretty excited about. And one of them, I'll tease a little bit, is related to George Orwell's 1984.
Mm-hmm.
But it will convey in a fiction format a lot of the principles in my nonfiction. The Opposite is True, but in a story format. That should be pretty inspiring.
I love it. Any final thoughts on advice for anybody in the executive protection industry, anybody looking to read your book or exploring this type of thing? Any curious listeners tuning in?
Yeah. I think a great hack for life in general is what I call association osmosis. So bad guys have one principal weapon that they use more than anything, and that's our denial. So when the good guys deny a lot of difficult realities, that's the best weapon that they use against us, but we wield it against ourselves. So I suggest to utilize the principle of association osmosis, which is whoever you hang out, you spend time with, they're going to rub off on you, whether you like it or not. So you might as well strategically hang out with winners and not be in denial about the bad people in your life, even if you've known them since kindergarten or you're quote unquote in love. Whatever the bias is where you're denying a lot of difficult realities, put up that boundary. Don't feel guilty about it to whatever degree you need to, and move forward towards your North Star.
I love it. Well, thank you very much. I know you're busy. I appreciate you coming down. This is awesome. Thank you.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.